It's not often that I have the opportunity to do what I'm going to do today at his direction, and so the first thing I do is to call upon the #1 president of the Brigham Young University, which has the #1 football team, who will present us with a brief message. President Jeffrey Holland.
If I'd have known how much trouble this football season was going to get me into, I'd have taken up soccer last fall. We're grateful to be on your campus. I speak for Sister Holland and myself, and as a member of the board of the Polynesian Cultural Center, as well as an administrator who shares a responsibility with President Cameron for this campus, we're delighted to be here with you and to see you start a new semester even as we are in Provo. I must say you're enjoying, even with a little rain last night and this morning, you're enjoying infinitely better weather than we're enjoying in Provo and Salt Lake. We left on Tuesday in an absolute blizzard. You couldn't see the hand in front of your face, and we cried all the way to the airport. So we're delighted to be here with you. I'm put in an awkward situation. For the last 90 days, I have been trying to convince people that football isn't the most important thing in the world at Brigham Young University, that it isn't somehow a matter of life and death. I said that in a public arena the other day, in a large public gathering, that it was not a matter of life and death, and some young man on the back row stood up and shouted and said, yes, it's a lot more important than that. I told Bill Gay on the way over here that I'm put in the position of the president of the University of Oklahoma, the same situation he was in the old Bud Wilkinson era, when he stood up and said, I hope someday to have a university our football team can be proud of. I'm working on that while our football fortunes continue to soar in a way that we never could have imagined. I'm reminded of the story years ago that a New Englander who had never seen a football game was hired as the president, this is about the turn of the century, was hired as the president of Texas Christian, where they did play football, and this New Englander was taken to his first football game. And after the game, his administrators solicitously ran up and asked what he thought of it. And he said, well, as nearly as I can tell, football is to higher education what bullfighting is to agriculture. We have a lot of that on our campus this season, and we're trying to keep it in perspective. But I take it lovingly and carefully and cautiously, remembering what Coach Bear Bryant said once, and that is that it's awfully hard to rally around a math class. So we've gone out there every Saturday and played football, and we haven't wanted to put too much pressure on Coach Edwards. We've said, Lavelle, we're behind you, win or tie, and he's seemed to feel pretty good about that. And some of you will note from the paper yesterday or the news last night that Coach Edwards has, for the second time this football season, once by the Washington Athletic Club, which is a significant kind of booster organization in the nation, was named earlier in the season the Coach of the Year for NCAA football, but was yesterday by his peers, by his fellow coaches in the NCAA, named the Intercollegiate Football Coach of the Year, and we think that's a marvelous personal honor that has come to Coach Edwards, and again reflects favorably on our team. Let me just close because I want to hear Elder Ashton just as you do. Let me just tell you one brief story that's come out of the football season that helps me keep it in perspective, and I hope that it helps you. We have had the kind of publicity around this experience that I suppose has never, ever been equaled in the history of 109 years of Brigham Young University. I'm not sure, Elder Ashton, I have no way to assess comparable publicity for the church, but I expect that perhaps not since the federal fistfight over polygamy, at least, maybe have we had that kind of publicity for an agency within the church. We have just had reams, I mean literally hundreds and hundreds of sheets of paper of one kind or another come across our desk from various newspapers or magazines or print media or electronic media from one side of the coast to the other and out to the islands. I hope some of it has gotten here, talking about this football team. And while it isn't the only thing that I would like our university to be known for, I have come over the course of the season to at least not begrudge the remarkable amount of attention that has come to the school and the university, and almost always about things that I do think we would be pleased to have noted. Some aspect of our larger university life, our academic programs, certainly a concentrated and consistent story about our standards, about what we believe, and how such an unusual football team can come out of such an unusual school. Every sports writer has been intrigued with the fact that there are 52 returned missionaries on that football team. And one newspaper bannered that while most teams worry about returning lettermen, we worry about returning missionaries. And then they start to tell stories about missionaries around the world, not the least of which is Sean Covey in South Africa, who's one of the quarterback heir apparents, I suppose, in the years ahead. But Sean's family told me that he has in fact been able to see some missionary success in South Africa because of publicity in the United States, Sports Illustrated primarily, which has talked about his serving on a mission and the fact that he will come back and join 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 others returned missionaries to play on this unique LDS BYU football team. We've also had the kind of attention paid to our honor code, our dress and grooming standards, our code of behavior that goes over into our academic area, our matters of integrity and honesty, and you know, entire stories have been written about that I suppose we couldn't have hired. I don't suppose we could have paid anyone to write those and run them on their front page. A Detroit newspaper bannered its entire Sunday section in color with a headline that took up a fourth of the page. If the page were quartered, the full top fourth just said the word purity. And then under that it said BYU football. And then under that it said how to win without cheating. And then under that it started the story by listing our honor code and indicating that men and women don't live together in dormitories at BYU, and that we don't drink and smoke, and you can't even get a cup of coffee on the campus, and things that intrigued sports writers who've never known what BYU was or where Provo, Utah was. And so, again, I'm in hopes that football isn't the only thing we'll ever do at BYU, but I'm willing to accept the fact that the hand of the Lord and can be in this, and that good things can come from it for the larger purposes of your life and ours on these two campuses, and the name of the university which we share. Now the story with which I close. After the Pitt game, the first game of the season, and probably the game that started us, well, obviously the win that started us on this unusual course of events that fell into place and allowed us to have this first ever national championship, something which Brother and Sister Rogers reminded me today that I said could never happen, and I really didn't believe that it could, not from Provo, Utah. But when we won that game on East Coast television, it was not national, but a third of the country saw that game on television. And when we won that game and were headed home, I suppose up to that point, that was, in terms of that named school, its football tradition and playing on their field in the East, our first ever Eastern victory in the history of the school. I suppose that would have to be considered the single greatest football victory in the history of the school. As they were coming home, the young men on the plane get in Salt Lake about midnight. By the time they get off the plane and pack their bags onto the bus, it's 1 o'clock. By the time they take the bus to Provo, it's 2 or 2:30. And by the time they get off the bus to the field house and get sorted around and back to Helaman Halls or wherever, it's 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. One of the young men who took the biggest, toughest beating in that game is a name some of you will recognize. It was a fine young Tongan Latter-day Saint by the name of Lake Hemuli, who played just up the street. Lake started that game in a way that would then lead to his starting every game all season long, but he was a very young, relatively inexperienced sophomore, scored one of our touchdowns but took a heck of a beating and was pretty sore, and the coach was a little concerned about him. He got in bed about 4 o'clock. At 7:45, he was standing in his branch in Provo, Utah, before the branch president, President Uluwave, with whom I have some regional representative responsibility. President Uluwave said with some shock on his face, "Lakay, why are you here?" Knowing that he could have just barely gotten home, knowing the kind of game he had, and certainly understanding if he'd have needed to stay in bed that morning. Lakay simply said, "President Uluwave, I'm a priest in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are only 3 of us in the branch, and I wasn't sure who'd be here to bless the sacrament." Lavelle Edwards told me last spring that this was the best team that he had ever had at BYU. He said, "Don't misunderstand, it is not the most talented team, but it is the best team we've ever had, and something special may happen." He was a better prophet than I was. Something special did happen, not because of talent largely, but because they were good. Good in ways that I think you understand and that I don't need to explain, but that Lakay said for all of you and for all of us in that very brief moment, after the biggest win BYU had probably then ever had, he's up in church blessing the sacrament because he's a priest in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thank you for this chance to greet you. We love you and pray for you and miss you when we're not here, and I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.